All right, friends. So what we're doing today, we're going to make some panna cotta, which is a great dessert. If you've never had it, it's almost like dairy jello, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And I'm surprised that it's not served in more places because it's actually very simple to make. It's delicious. It's refreshing. And we'll show you how that's going to work. First, let's just talk about what are the ingredients that are going to go into this. What I have here, we've got 2 cups of heavy cream. I have a cup of half and half. I've got a teaspoon and a half of vanilla extract, pure, genuine, not the imitation stuff. You could also, if you wanted to, throw in some like coconut extract or something like that if you wanted to go with a little bit different flavor, which I have done before. I've got a couple of tablespoons of cold water in which we're going to put some of this gelatin. And then I have 1/3 cup of just regular granulated sugar. And then I have a little bit of Clyde Mays bourbon. That doesn't go into anything except for me. All right, so I've put that little bit of water into a very small saucepan. And into that, I'm going to sprinkle this gelatin. We're going to let it sit for a minute to start to absorb a little bit. We actually are going to heat it up as well. There we go. And then in a little bit bigger pan, I'm going to add my cream. Pardon my very messy kitchen right now if it comes into play. My milk. And my sugar. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat on. I'm just going to turn it to medium. I want this to simmer. I don't really want it to boil, okay? Which is generally the case when you're dealing with milk type products, dairy products. If you let this stuff boil, it can very easily overflow the pan. And if you're not familiar with that, those milk solids, if they go over, actually can catch fire, which is no bueno. All right, so we're going to let this go for a little bit. All right, I went ahead and just turned, it's been sitting for about a minute or so. I went ahead and turned the heat on its lowest here on one of the smaller burners. I want this gelatin to be not solid, but a little more, a little more runny for when I'm going to add it to the dairy. All right, so now that the cream mixture has come to a boil, I know that my sugar is probably melted fine and dissolved into that. I'm going to kill the heat. I'll go ahead and take my gelatin, add it. I'm going to add my vanilla. And I'm going to give this a stir. There are a couple things that you could do from here as far as how you get it into your, you can put it in ramekins, or in my case, I'm actually putting them in some small, they're 4-ounce plastic containers. I get a lot of stuff at GFS to do these things. I find that using a ladle doesn't really, it makes a mess. So I'm going to take my mixture and I'm going to pour it into Pyrex that has a spout. Now it's just simply a matter of filling up the cups. If you haven't done it, highly recommend picking up these sorts of storage pieces. You'll notice when I started, I had all my ingredients for the most part in deli containers that I got from GFS. I like them a lot better. than I like Tupperware sorts of things, because I can wash them. They actually go fine in the dishwasher, but if I don't want to put them in the dishwasher, I don't have to. I can toss them because they're not that expensive. So one of the things that I'll mention is, so I put all of my panna cottas that I just poured into their containers in the fridge. I did not put lids on them yet because they're very hot still. And if I do that, which I've done before, because of all that steam, all that heat, it'll actually warp the containers. It doesn't ruin the panna cotta or anything. I didn't have issues with condensation dripping on the surface and causing it abnormalities or whatever. But it did make them a little bit funky shaped. So I'm going to let them cool off a little bit, and then I will put lids on the containers. Just little plastic lids that are designed to go with that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a sauce, because the panna cotta is good on its own. You get that nice kind of lovely vanilla flavor, but it's even better when you put sauce over the top, which we're going to do with raspberries, which we're going to make into kind of a syrup, and then we'll use fresh raspberries to top. So it's nighttime here. It's almost 10:30 at night. Those are going to want to sit overnight. Usually 4 hours probably is what you would want to make sure you had to let them set up. Similar to Jell-O, because, gee, there's gelatin in it. So we'll have to see how they turn out tomorrow. Never had a problem with them. I've made them quite a few times, and they're quite tasty. So next we're going to work on the syrup. All right, so we're just going to make a bunch of syrup because this stuff is good on everything. So I'm going to use this whole package of frozen raspberries. You could use fresh, but it's not necessary, and the frozen are cheaper. So when it comes to making syrups and stuff, sauces, frozen's fine. So I got a whole bag of it's 12 ounces, and I'm going to throw, I don't know, maybe a third of a cup or so of sugar in there. And you know what? Let's throw a little bit of water on here too. Not a bunch, tablespoon or two. And then I'm also going to put, normally I would do like some lemon juice, fresh, but I have limes. I don't have any lemons in. So give me a second and I'll grab one. So what I did is I took a lime and I cut it down the side. You can see here, instead of cutting it in half. It's not as big of a deal with the limes as it is with lemons, but when you do that, you mostly avoid having any issues with seeds. So I'm going to just squeeze a little bit of lime juice in there. So acid basically helps to brighten things up. It helps to preserve the fruit from spoilage, and you get a nice little zing out of it. It's, again, you don't want to overwhelm it because the primary thing here is going to be raspberries, or you could do it with blueberries, whatever you have. You could take a bag of mixed frozen berries, or you could do strawberries, whatever you want. It's the same principle. You just throw it in a pan, a little bit of sugar, tiny little bit of water, and we'll taste it as we go. All right, so I have the heat on pretty low. You can see I've got a little bubble going around the edges there. So we're going to let this go for a little bit, but I am going to use this potato masher just to help things along a little bit. Just to break those berries up some. And what we're going to do is we're going to let this simmer away and let it thicken up a little bit. Which, one, simmering and the bubbles that you see, when you see that, and you see a little bit of steam comes with it, and that's relieving it of some of the water, right? So as it loses water, it starts to thicken up. And the other thing is that the little bit of sugar that's in there will also cause it to thicken a little bit as well. It doesn't turn into something like a jam or something, because you actually would need more of the gelatin like we used earlier. I'm also at this point going to just take a second, and I'm going to see how the flavor on this is and see if I want to add any additional sugar. Do I want any more of the acid from the lime, or are we good where we are? It's pretty good where it is, actually. Yeah, I think I'm good exactly where I am. All right, so this step isn't really necessary, but a lot of times what I'll do, just to make sure that I get it nice and smooth, is I toss this all into my blender. Let me set this down over here. I killed the heat on the gas when I did this. I'm not going to blend it to death. I'm just going to do a little, probably like 4 or 5 pulses. Partially I do that because I want to make sure that all of the flesh of the berries are done. And again, this isn't necessary. It's just something I do. You'll still have a bunch of seeds, which we're going to strain, which again, you wouldn't have to, but I do. There's that. We'll go ahead and get this back on low. And we're going to let this go for a little bit. Oh, and stir it occasionally. You don't want it to, like, especially if it's bubbling very much, you don't want it to burn or anything. So just give it an occasional stir. You don't have to stand, you know, and stir constantly, but stir some. All right, this has been going for another 3 or 4 minutes here. I splattered a little bit, you can see from stirring. So we are going to go ahead and kill the heat. And we're going to strain it. You wouldn't have to. Again, if you're okay with the seeds, that's fine. I personally, when I do these, I like to strain out the seeds. You can just use a small strainer. I also put some cheesecloth in it. So if you've got cheesecloth, that's awesome, because otherwise it is a little bit of a pain in the butt, truly, to get all the seeds out of the strainer, because they will get stuck in the strainer. So I'm going to just let that go on through. I'll help it through with my spatula here a little bit. Again, you don't have to have the cheesecloth. It just, I find, makes your life a little bit easier. So it's just as hard for me to do holding with one hand on the phone. So I'm going to turn this off and get all this through the strainer. All right, so a couple last little things. I went ahead and got all of the sauce strained, and I highly recommend that you, one thing that I've always told my kids is clean as you go. So you'll notice I've already, like all the others, it's a mess in here right now from everything else, but I've already started cleaning the blender and debating whether or not I want to use that immersion circulator again tonight, but we'll see, because I'm defrosting a turkey breast in there. But you also may remember I mentioned I strained all of that because of all the seeds. And this is a lot of seeds. And you may be okay with them. Personally, I prefer not to have them in there. You can store this in whatever you choose. I like having it in a squeeze bottle just because it makes it pretty easy for serving with the panna cottas. And it'll actually thicken up a little bit more once it cools down. Boom. And so there we have our raspberry sauce to go with our panna cotta. And we've got some fresh raspberries that are going to go with that as well. So we'll have everything we need tomorrow for a wonderful dessert for Easter.